According to a recent United Nations report, 1 million species are at the risk of extinction due to human activities such as deforestation, global warming, overfishing, overhunting, toxic pollution, and climate change. The report is called Global Assessment Report on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. On May 6th, a 40-page summary for the policymakers of this report was released, and the full report, which might exceed around 1,500 pages, is going to be released later this year. The report is based on a review of about 15,000 scientific and government sources and is compiled by 145 expert authors from 50 countries. So just as the background information, around 8.7 million species on Earth form a life-supporting safety net which provides our food, air, water, energy, and much more. And according to this report, not only this safety net shrinking, it's becoming more threadbare and holes are appearing. Some tropical forests have nearly gone silent as insect species have vanished, and grasslands are increasingly becoming deserts. The biggest worry for the scientists is the state of the oceans: plastics, dead zones, overfishing, acidification. Due to all these factors, we are really screwing up the oceans in a really big way. Forests, oceans, and other parts of nature soak up 60% of global fossil fuel emissions every year. And according to this report, we need to secure the biosphere to protect the climate and help buffer us from extreme weather events. Coral reefs and mangroves protect coastal areas from storms such as hurricanes, and wetlands reduce flooding by absorbing heavy rainfall. And yet, each of these ecosystems has declined dramatically, with wetlands down to less than 15% of what they were 300 years ago. And coral reefs are also facing a global bleaching crisis. Now, a bleaching crisis is the one when coral reefs expel tiny algae from inside of their tissues, and they expel these algae due to the warming of ocean water. Now, these algae are responsible for providing food to coral reefs, and hence when they expel these algae, they die. To avert this tragedy, nearly 100 groups around the world, including groups like National Geographic Society, have come together and they have set a target of protecting 50% of the planet by the year 2050. They have also set an interim target of protecting 30% of the planet by the year 2030. And this is termed as Global Deal for Nature. The main message of this report is that transformative change is really needed and there are no other options. And in order to safeguard a healthy planet, society needs to shift from a sole focus on chasing economic growth. And that won't be easy, as this report acknowledges, but it could get easier if countries begin to base their economies on an understanding that nature is the foundation for development. What that means in practical terms, as this report says, is that countries need to reform hundreds of billions in dollars in subsidies and incentives that are currently given to the exploitative industries like energy, fishing, agriculture, and forestry sectors. Instead of driving additional exploitation of the world's natural resources, these subsidies should be shifted to incentivize protection and restoration of nature. There is one more interesting evidence gathered by IPBES, which shows that nature managed by the indigenous people and local communities is in generally better health than nature managed by the national or corporate institutions. At least a quarter of the global land area is traditionally owned, managed, used, or occupied by indigenous peoples. However, their land tenure and other rights are not always protected or recognized by all countries, nor is their deep knowledge of the land and their values often considered in policies and decisions by the governments, and that needs to change, as this report noted. Indigenous peoples are the key partners in the global transformation that's needed, and yet countries are still slow to recognize this. Just take an example of Philippines, and 40 years ago, indigenous people there stopped construction of dams on Chico River because they were concerned about impacts on their land, and yet those dams are now being built by China under their $1 trillion Belt and Road Infrastructure Initiative. China has an important role to play in global discussions around biodiversity because the country will host a major United Nations conference called the UN Convention on Biological Diversity in the late 2020. The evidence is clear. The future will be bad for us if we don't act now. There is no future for us without nature.